Hello and welcome to Friday Live. I am Amanda Farmer and we are going out to the Your Strata Property Facebook page and also out to LinkedIn. How are you doing? How has your week in Strata been? It's fabulous to be back here with you for yet another Friday Live. Who was with me on that fabulous online event last Friday, an afternoon with Adam Goods and Dr. Tim Sharp, Dr. Happy. What a fabulous event that was. So many of you are still talking about it. I know I was honored to be invited to MC that event. Over 600 Strata peeps online enjoying a Friday afternoon, hearing from the fabulous man that is Adam Goods and getting some tips on how we can be making the best of a difficult situation from Dr. Tim Sharp. I saw lots of familiar names and faces, many of our Friday Live crew there at that event as well. And another webinar this week, Tuesday, was my webinar for the City of Ryde Council. Again, so many familiar names there. It's always lovely to have your support on our webinars. That was our bylaws webinar, how we can combat bad behavior and improve our strata communities by tapping into the power of bylaws. And how are you all going dealing with our online work and online education in the midst of lockdown with kids around and now school holidays in New South Wales? I know that's been a little bit tricky for me. The friend bubble that has been introduced in New South Wales for our kids is great because they can now have some friends over, one or two friends, which is good. And I have a couple running around here. So I'm just giving you a heads up. We might have some screams, we may have some footballs at the window, but we will do our best. As long as my computer doesn't shut down mid-live this week, as it did a couple of weeks ago, we'll be right. But hey, we can get through. If we can get through that, we can get through anything these days, can't we? Drop me a hello if you are coming in. So many of you are. It's always lovely to see you and to know that you're tuning in and see how you're going on your weekend strata. Petra is already giving me a hello there. How are you doing, Petra? Have you caught our podcast episode? This week, Rena and I recorded that one quite quickly earlier in the week, and I wanted to get it out to you in your inboxes before the end of this week. Podcast episode number 280. Rena and I covered our challenges and our wins, and we were talking about the reopening of public outdoor pools in New South Wales. And of course, that is raising all sorts of questions within our apartment communities about the reopening of strata pools, strata gyms. Rena and I were debating whether it is now the time for our strata buildings to be reopening their recreational facilities. And if they do, what kinds of rules should there be? Will there be around the use of those facilities? Is it legal for our owners corporation to impose a requirement that a resident must be double vaxxed, fully vaxxed, if they are going to be using recreational facilities? And I spoke in the episode about how difficult these questions are. We haven't yet seen the laws that are going to regulate our public spaces, our commercial spaces. We're being told that only fully vaxxed people will be able to use those spaces. What of our residential spaces, our common property in our strata schemes? So these questions just starting to be asked by strata lawyers, communities, definitely, strata managers. And I'm hearing from a few of you posting on LinkedIn and also on Facebook, sharing your experiences of what is happening in your community at the moment, what you are seeing in the communities that you serve. And I really welcome you to keep sharing with me and with your neighbors, your residents, your colleagues, what is going on. Are you implementing rules in your community about the use of shared facilities now that we are moving along our roadmap to freedom in New South Wales? How is that going? What are residents thinking of that? The more we share, then the more knowledge we can all gain and all move forward as best we can in this new world order. Lots of you coming in and saying hi now. Thank you very much. Leo is here. Good afternoon to Leo. Petra saying it's as good as it can be with COVID, trying to overcome cabin fever. Yes, it gets worse right before it gets better, right? We can see perhaps the light at the end of the tunnel, and it is particularly a difficult time now, I know. Casey is saying hi. Henry's saying hi, Amanda. A public holiday in Melbourne for a grand final in Perth. It is like Christmas in jail. Henry, my sweetheart, our poor Victorians like Henry, who it just seems to keep coming at you, doesn't it? Our hearts go out to you. We're really thinking of you, our Victorians who are suffering particularly at this time. I know. Look after yourselves and each other. Today, I do have indeed a special guest waiting in the wings for you. She is Dr. Nicole Johnston, and I will bring her on very, very shortly to share with us her findings from her very important recent research into the strata insurance industry right across Australia and New Zealand. Now, I mentioned that Tuesday was webinar day. Over 200 people registered to attend our webinar for the City of Ryde Council, one of my famous bylaws webinars. I'm always blown away by how many people are so eager to continue to improve their knowledge about the power of bylaws. We spoke about the 4 bylaw mistakes that I see communities making, owners, strata managers, the 4 bylaw mistakes. If you want to find out what the 4 bylaw mistakes were and you missed out on the webinar, not to worry. I do have the replay for you, and I'm going to give you a link where you can access the replay, and I might actually take you over to the page so you can see what it looks like when you hit the page. Rochelle will pop the link in here to the chat for us. It is stratamembership.com, and I'm going to share my screen with you if I have the right tab going here to show you just what you will see when you hit that page. Hoping I'm sharing that. That is looking good for me, looking good to me at my end here. When you hit the page stratamembership.com, it looks like this. If you scroll down a little, that is where you will see your replay of the bylaws webinar. And you may have just caught up the top here, there is a special opportunity that is ending at midnight on Sunday. I want to tell you a little bit about that. What is it? On the webinar, I opened up the doors to the Your Strata Property online community. Now, this is where people just like you, owners, committee members, strata managers, are getting access to my one-on-one support. That's where I'm sharing the resources that I use for clients of my legal practice at a fraction of the price that I usually charge. Now, there is a summary here on this page under your webinar replay of your strata support system. This is what our members on the inside are enjoying. Access to our Q&A forum, the complete templates library. There's a new template going in there every few weeks. Access to a 1-hour one-on-one call with me. That's valued at over $1,000. Access to your webinar library, the recordings from our shared space summit, our video library, and these members' opportunities. Not to mention your supportive community of like-minded owners and managers. Now, there's a heap of value there. Over $7,400 in value, but membership is not that much. It's not $7,000. It's not $3,000. It's not even $1,000. You can join us for just $49 a month, and that's no lock-in. So check out that page. You will find the replay to the bylaws webinar that happened on Tuesday this week, scrolling back up to show you where that access is. Check it out. And if you'd like to join us inside the membership, this weekend is the time to do it. The doors are usually closed. I only open them up on special occasions. This link, stratamembership.com, has only been publicized to those who registered for the webinar, but I wanted to make sure that you, my Friday Live crew, were able to take up this limited time opportunity to join us all on the inside as well. Doors are closing at midnight on Sunday, so do get in before then. I would love to see you over in our online community. I'm going to hit that button now, and yes, I'm back with you. Love it. Got all my buttons right this time. Just having a look here at some more of you coming on in and saying hi. Colin is saying hi from New Zealand. Great bylaw talk from Ryde. All Blacks play South Africa in Townsville. A different world. Yes, indeed. Just like the AFL Grand Final over in Perth, as Henry pointed out earlier. Jacqueline is saying these videos are better than any daytime telly. Such an insight into other people's lives. Loved the bylaw mistakes. Yes, and I love that emoji, Jacqueline. I had an image on the webinar of a lady doing something similar as she was realizing the bylaw mistakes. OMG, don't worry. If you're making the mistakes, the webinar is all about helping you to resolve the fallout from what may be those mistakes. And even better, if you haven't made them yet, great, how to avoid the 4 mistakes. So if you didn't catch the webinar, the replay is over at stratamembership.com. Rochelle has popped that here in the comments for us. Cupido, hi, how are you doing? It's nice to see you there. Okay, welcome. Lots of you coming on in to hear from our special guest. She is indeed Dr. Nicole Johnston. Dr. Nicole is an admitted legal practitioner currently working as a senior lecturer and a researcher at Deakin University's Business School. She is a co-leader of Deakin's Home Research Group, an interdisciplinary research network. Nicole researches strata-related topics from a socio-legal perspective. Her work focuses on strata governance, conflicts of interest, purchaser knowledge acquisition, and building defects in residential schemes. She is the chair of the International Research Forum on Multi-Owned Properties, a multidisciplinary research conference held annually. Now, if you have been one of our loyal Friday Live viewers for some time now, you may remember that Dr. Nicole Johnston was my guest way back in December 2020. Nicole's been a guest a few times on the podcast and on Friday Live, but in December 2020, we were the first to hear about a new research project which Deakin University, Dr. Nicole Johnston, and Strata Community Association had partnered on for 2021, focused on strata insurance. And it was all about surveying owners to gain insight into the current insurance model. And it was also your chance to have your say on hot insurance topics, including insurance commissions. Now, the report arising from that research has been published. It is titled A Data-Driven Holistic Understanding of Strata Insurance in Australia and New Zealand. Its author is Dr. Nicole Johnston. She is here with us today. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you very much for having me again, Amanda. It's lovely to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us. And we were just chatting off air about you guys up there in Queensland living it up. We're very jealous.
I know. And I was just looking at the little comment about the Victorians. I did escape. I work for a Victorian university. I'm have been a Melbourne girl for the last sort of 7.5 years. But when this pandemic started, I escaped. And I've been residing in sunny Queensland with very little restrictions for some time now. So I do think about all my friends and colleagues both in Sydney and Melbourne, and I hope they're all doing well.
Well, we will be looking forward. We're all looking forward very much to being able to get back together across borders with our Queensland friends and colleagues, hopefully, and other parts of the country as well. We will get there. Now, Nicole, I was reading your fabulous report and having a look at your executive summary. We do have a link here to the report. Rochelle is going to pop it in the notes here for us. It's lengthy at over 200 pages, but I think your summary alone is valuable for those who don't have perhaps the time or the inclination, come on, let's face it, to read everything. Check out this executive summary. The first thing that jumped out to me, if we start there, is the incredibly complex nature of our regulatory environment when it comes to strata insurance. Can you share a bit about what you found there, Nicole?
Yeah, Amanda and I sort of feel the same. I think when I initially decided that I'd take on this challenge of doing this research, and one of the key areas that I wanted to look at was the regulatory environment. And I thought it was really important to look at all jurisdictions and how we're all tackling this area of strata insurance. And what I was hoping was really that there would be some real consistency. I thought it would be a really easy task for me, even though doing cross-jurisdictional reviews of laws is always complicated. I thought it would be fairly straightforward, and found it to be an extremely complex and laborious task. And what really came out of it was the fact that there's such an inconsistent approach, there's such variation across all the states and territories in relation to how strata insurance is regulated. And that's just from the first instance looking at the legislation that regulates strata, so our governance legislation, let alone the other legislation and regulations that we looked at in terms of taxes, and more around insurance contracts generally and those sorts of things. So I was really surprised. It was a big task for us to look at. And one of the key things was, even though we've got very similar mandatory requirements around, for example, having the mandatory provisions around insuring the building or the scheme, and also public liability, the terms that we use are very varied. And then when you start to dig down into the nuts and bolts of the legislation in each state and territory, that's where you start to see a lot of variation. So what's actually required to be covered is very, very different in every single state. What the exclusions are, what must be the inclusions, and so forth, extremely varied. So on the surface, strata insurance laws seem pretty straightforward. These are the things that we must insure for. But when you actually start to dig into the detail, that's where it starts to get very, very complex.
I was reading in your report, you found that there were at least 38 pieces of legislation and associated regulations across Australia and New Zealand, and 12 legal topics you identified relevant to strata insurance. And you've said that strata managers are required to have a working knowledge of all of this relevant legislation because they are expected to assist their clients to navigate that complex framework. What were your findings in respect of strata managers and having this knowledge, being aware perhaps that they should have this knowledge, and their clients being able to rely on that knowledge? Is that something that's happening out there in the market?
Yeah, so I think there's some confusion around the extent to which a strata manager is to guide, inform, or advise in relation to any law in Australia. And it is a bit of a tricky one, and it is for a lot of sort of ancillary professions that sit on the border or are regulated or have to help their clients regulate or navigate a really complex regulatory environment. And so, as you know, lawyers, managers or anyone else aren't supposed to provide legal advice. That's what they're that's an exclusion there. It needs to, anything complex or where there's actual legal advice has to go to a lawyer. But they certainly have to have a good working knowledge. And in some jurisdictions, that's expressly stated either in the code of conduct that attaches to the legislation, or it's sort of implied in various other ways through the duties that go towards strata managers. So you get a general sense that they have to have this, good working knowledge of the legislation to really help guide and inform the owner's corporation or the body corporate through the different governance frameworks or the different governance areas in relation to strata, and insurance is part of that. I think there's always work that needs to be done, and I think looking really at the complexity of it, there is it would be really hard, I think, to really get a full understanding, because it's subject obviously to a lot of interpretation, these provisions, and so I think it would be quite difficult for a lot of strata managers to know the intricacies of the legislation, but they're certainly, reliant on other parties in the supply chain to assist them in what this all means, including brokers and, the underwriting agencies and also the insurers themselves. So, and of course, they sort of there's a good legal group that sort of sit around this that have good knowledge in relation to strata more generally that can assist. So I think it's like anything. I think there's strata managers out there that have a pretty good idea, and then I think there's strata managers that would find it very difficult to navigate. And I think at the end of this research, what was very apparent to me is the need for more education to get that messaging out and to really assist managers in assisting their clients. Because I think a committee on their own, or an owner on, or a strata lot owner on their own, would find it very, very challenging to make sure that they are complying with all the rules that sit within the regulatory framework.
And did you find that owners felt that their strata manager was a source of knowledge or a place to go to get information about insurance?
Yeah, so I think we have to step back a little bit and think about who actually participated in the research, because that's really important to frame it, give it context. And so a lot of the survey went out through a number of different groups. It's always really hard to get to lot owners for them to participate in research, because oftentimes we need a conduit in the middle to get to them. So I don't have a database of strata lot owners, for example, that I can just sort of speak to. I usually have to go through, like your strata property was really great in getting the survey out to the members. And there were a number of other people that really work on behalf of owners that did that as well. And so that's the only vehicle that I can really use to get the surveys out. Now, when you get a survey out through those sorts of mechanisms, the type of lot owner that usually decides to participate is usually not a representative, doesn't become a representative sample. What we found when we looked at who actually participated in the surveys, and I thank those that did, it's fantastic that people do participate, but it was a really highly sophisticated group of owners. They were people that were very active, very well educated. They had owned a number of different strata schemes either at that particular time or throughout their lives. So it wasn't sort of the general lot owner. It was a sophisticated group. And I think from a research perspective, we're always looking for that representative sample. We want to hear the voices from all the different people involved in strata. That is very difficult to do. And so, but instead of just dismissing it, I think it's important that we take those people, so there was 280 participants, and really value what they are telling us, because they are a sophisticated group. They know, they have good working knowledge about what's going on in strata, how decisions are made. They're pretty across, have a good working knowledge of the legislation and so forth. So they're the people that we want to, that have a really important voice in this conversation. So it's not a representative group. So I think they were highly sophisticated. They had some really good understanding in terms of, how the process actually works, how the commission system works, what's going on internally, and that sort of thing. So, so I probably missed your main question.
No, that's okay. I was asking you whether the owners who you surveyed appeared to be aware that their strata manager was indeed a source of information, of knowledge, of advice within the limits of their professional engagement about insurance. Because I would think that maybe there'd be owners out there thinking, well, if we want advice about insurance, we talk to the insurer or we talk to the broker, and our strata manager doesn't really do anything about insurance. They just send us the quotes and
so it varied. So the responses really varied, Amanda. There were some people that were very clear that their managers were very helpful, that they relied on them to be that person to provide that information to them. And then, of course, you get people that aren't happy with their manager who is not providing that information, because you get obviously variation in any professional groups. You have people that are really active and have that knowledge source and are really good communicators with their clients. And then you have others that are lacking that education or that experience around strata insurance, and then probably don't actually communicate effectively to their clients. So you saw that in the data. You could see that coming out of the data, that there was some that were really reliant and thought that their manager did have good knowledge, and then to the other extent where people were very dissatisfied with the services that were being provided. But overall, what a real clear theme that was coming through a number of the different data sources that we looked at in relation to this research was that there was a real lack of transparency and a lack of communication generally in relation to strata services and the process. And so that was one of the key messages that I'm taking back to the SCA and strata managers to say, you need to engage better with your clients, the owners corporation and lot owners, in relation to the services that you provide, because you aren't clear about that. And so a lot of the comments were, we don't know what they do. And I've said to the managers, well, of course, owners and committees don't know what you do because you don't communicate that effectively to them, both in the agreements and in any other mechanism. And so I think there's work that needs to be done from the management perspective about communicating much more effectively to their clients in relation to the services they actually provide.
Not just about insurance, but about all the services that they provide as strata managers.
Well, this was
Fascinating.
specifically looking at insurance, but yes, I think they can.
What came
I think
out?
if we start to look at the agreements and see and get a bit of an idea about the services that they're providing, and you would think that would be the first port of call to look at. I think there needs to be more work to be clear about what the services are of a manager, and I think there's confusion generally, and I think we've heard this over many years working in this area, that there is confusion about specifically what the role of the strata manager is.
Now I'm going to share screen again here, Nicole, because I want to show one of the images, the figures in your reports that is titled the Strata Management Value Pillars, because I think this is a good part of the discussion to head over there. And then I'm going to dive into some of these comments that are coming through. There's some good ones. Let me just get this correct screen going here. Just one moment. And we should shortly be able to see on the screen. Perfect. These are the strata management value pillars. And we've just been talking about strata managers having a messaging problem, a marketing problem, perhaps a communication problem when it comes to explaining to their clients exactly what it is that they do and where their value is. Can you speak to this image here, Nicole, and where this fits in your report? And what we're seeing here in this table?
Sure. So there was two different components of the research or aims of the project, and I think when you're ever reading a research report like this and understanding the research, you've got to be clear about what the aims are. So although this is a very comprehensive overview, it's been directed by two aims, and one was to look at the data around insurance as far as the cost of insurance, the number of claims, and the policies that are taken up in relation to strata schemes. So that was sort of the first aim. The second aim was very much looking around the role of the manager in the process and the value that they bring to the particular process. And so I've spoken to you about the services and how, unfortunately, when you look at an agreement, and we did a sort of a review of a number of management agreements across the country, what was really difficult is we couldn't really extract from those agreements what the services were. There were sort of broad terms that were used. It wasn't very clear, and there were certainly no discrete services that were outlined in the agreement. So one part of this was looking at and trying to identify what the services are that managers are actually undertaking, and there were quite a lot when you start to sort of delve into it. The next part was sort of to think about value. So of course they're doing services and they're being paid for those services, but they also bring other things into the picture as far as the other roles that they really take on. And this is where the sort of value pillars came up, and there may be more value pillars as we sort of do more research into this area, but I really see them as, obviously they're agents, and there's a principal agency agreement. They're acting on behalf of the owners corporation or the body corporate. They're custodians, and then they've got this great knowledge bank, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these. So in relation to that agency relationship, they have to do certain things as agent for the owners corporation. So that's about the value that they bring to it and the reliance that an owners corporation has on a manager. So they have to obtain authorities to engage in the insurance process, and that's often done through meetings. They're that conduit between so many people in the supply chain, and there are a number of people in the supply chain when it comes to insurance. So there's often a broker, there's the insurer, there's an underwriter, there's valuers, lot owners, and other stakeholders that might be interested in the information around insurance. And of course, you need really, in a lot of these schemes, to have that relationship, because it ensures strata insurances the arrangements are put in place so that that you don't miss time limitations in relation to placing insurance, that the premiums actually get paid on time, that evaluation is obtained and then provided to a third party, that claims are managed, and sometimes these are complex claims, and that certain advice or guidance is actually provided. So that's sort of one of the extra roles that they are fulfilling. They're also the custodians, and in so many schemes, this is a real necessary element, because there has to be this repository of information. As we know, lot owners come and go from a scheme, committees change and so forth. So you need to have a central area for information to be kept. And this is really important when it comes to insurance, especially around disclosure. So disclosing information to the insurer about what's going on in your scheme is a vital thing to do. There's duties that attach to that requirement. So being the custodian really enables efficient collection, collation, and distribution of information to all those different people in the supply chain. It certainly enhances and streamlines that sort of disclosure that I mentioned, and it enables essential registers to be put in one place. So if there's issues around boundaries, for example, between private lot property and common property, it sort of has all the information about the assets, which is really important for insurance purposes. It's keeping that under the one umbrella. So that's an important extra, job really that managers are doing. And of course, they have really a knowledge bank, because as we spoke about before, there are duties, sometimes implied, sometimes more expressed, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, that you are to provide some sort of guidance around those legal rules to your clients. So having those duties requires you to be across the legislation. You may be an authorised representative, which requires you to do certain training. You also get gained experience through a lot of different portfolios that you use, so that repeat sort of business, looking at large volumes of schemes. You get to know it really well. If you're an owner doing it once a year, I mean, I'm a committee member. I sit on a very large body corporate. I'm the chair of a very large body corporate, and I would hate to have to deal with that every year, going through, finding quotes and so forth. I'd definitely push it over to someone else that deals with it all the time. That repetitive work is really important. And of course, they do get professional development through ongoing education and training through different areas, especially those that are connected to SCA. They have, CPD points and those sorts of things. So they're required to have a certain level of education. So I think there is value that sits under the role and the job that they do in relation to insurance that probably is not being clearly communicated to lot owners.
And what a fabulous resource this image is here, and these strata management value pillars. I'm often asked, Amanda, what do strata managers do? Is my strata manager supposed to be providing me with legal guidance? Are they just a post box? I think this is a fabulous way of showing the layers inherent in a strata manager's role. And clever strata managers out here, take a look at this. You can really dig into this in your marketing, and you're hearing Nicole say, most managers are falling down when it comes to communicating their value. Nicole's done it for you, you guys.
Exactly.
This is a really, really valuable part of that report. So that's why I wanted to focus on that one in particular. I'm going to, and thank you for breaking that down for us, Nicole. I'm going to stop that share now and just head over. There's been a couple of comments as we have been talking. Here's a long one. I will try to get on the screen without cutting our heads off here from Bill and Ben. The legislation has always envisaged that generally strata schemes would be managed by ordinary lot owners for their own benefit. And he's listed a case there, as if that's possible, given the complexity of regulations, general rules of conduct applying to agents, assistant agents. Very, very, I'm not getting all of the comment there because I can't see it all on my screen. But you're right, Bill and Ben. I was chatting, I think it was to Ross Taylor in our podcast chat a few weeks ago, where Ross said the strata management legislation generally was designed for our very simple 3 or 4 story red brick walk-ups from the 50s and 60s. And our buildings these days are so incredibly complex. And your research has really revealed that, Nicole, specific to just one part of our buildings and our management industry, the insurance aspect. But there is just no way. I think I certainly don't want to be involved in a building that doesn't have a professional manager doing these jobs. Even something as seemingly simple and straightforward as being the custodian, as you say, in that central pillar, custodian of records, and having that longevity of knowledge and that ability to report to a new insurer perhaps, or dig into the records in respect of a claim, what the history of a building has been. That might be obvious to strata managers. Oh yeah, of course we do that. Of course, and people know we do that. And of course there's value in that. You gotta say it. You've got to
Yeah,
highlight that.
and I think that's really key, Amanda, and that sort of, and I've been really clear with the management industry in particular about this, that you know what you do and you think that other people do, but they just don't. And that was really clear because so many comments were, we don't know what they do. And as I said to them, that's not owner's fault or committee's fault. That's your fault because you haven't communicated effectively. And I think that's the thing. And I think that might be with a lot of professions until you have someone over your shoulder looking at what you actually do. You haven't been, you can't articulate it clearly enough. And I think that's where there's been a fall down here.
Yep, I agree. Point here, or question, I think it is, from Michael Tees, a colleague of ours. Nice to see you, Michael. Hi, Amanda and Nicole. Do we know anything about the extent to which Strata committee members get sued? Interested in Nicole's finding that not all schemes have officers' liability insurance. Oh, yes, indeed, Michael. That's something that I'm often asked from lot owner clients. Amanda, I want to sue the committee. How successful will I be? Can you send me some cases where owners have successfully sued committee members in negligence? And at least here in New South Wales, I go, few and far between, that's for sure. I've seen them settled, I've seen them attempted, but we really don't have many, if any. Someone here will tell me if I'm missing an obvious one. Reported cases of successfully suing committee members. Nicole, your finding about office bearers' liability insurance?
Yeah, so 2 points. So in some states, there's an indemnity in the legislation, so it probably would make it quite tough in some instances to sue committee members. So just sort of probably depends on your jurisdictions. I don't know of any great cases that come to mind around that. In relation to the office bearers liability, I think this was really quite interesting, one of the findings. So we looked at or got data in relation to policy take-up. So all the different types of policies and the component parts of policies, and looking across the jurisdictions, which states are taking up the different ones. Obviously with the mandatory ones, it was really clear, they were being taken up a lot. And there are some other things like voluntary workers and those sorts of things that are sort of rolled up into your mandatory provisions within your policy, I think. So they sort of were taken up at 100% as well. But things like machinery breakdown, catastrophe cover, and certainly office bearers liability, that's where the variations came from each state. So you had some states really high. I think from memory, overall in Australia, there's about a 60% take up of that policy across all schemes. And then you start to see real variation in each of the jurisdictions. In part, it could have something to do with those states with much more complex schemes or larger schemes where they're probably being professionally managed, and there's been, probably advice given that they should have office bearers liability, and the smaller schemes perhaps aren't being covered that way. I would love to know the answer to some of that, to why there was such variation. I think maybe the managers from the different states could probably, or maybe some people here today can tell me why that there might be some states that are taking it up at much higher rates than other states, but I haven't quite solved that one yet.
Yeah, and I am just as I think it, Bill and Ben is typing it, which is sometimes the case here on our videos. Bill and Ben is saying suing the Strata committee members. Section 260 in our Strata Schemes Management Act is of course relevant. Our committee members have an indemnity from the owner's corporation if they are acting in good faith and they are not exposed to personal liability. And that is indeed what Section 260 in our New South Wales Act says. Committee members do, pursuant to our legislation, have a duty to act with due care and diligence. And if they're not doing that, query, and I think that's what Bill and Ben's doing here, what does that mean? What is this threshold to show that they're not acting in good faith and therefore exposed to personal liability? And that's not something that we have seen tested in our New South Wales courts. So perhaps to Michael's question about how often do we see committee members get sued, not very. And that may be why some buildings, from my point of view, don't bother with the office bearer's liability insurance, or they rely on Section 260 that they're covered by the owner's corporation. Don't think I'd be one of those committee members who's quite happy to run loose and free without any insurance.
And I mean, it could be also, a bit of pressure around costs to pull down. I don't know how much that particular part of the policy would actually cost, whether there would be a big cost savings in relation to that. We didn't quite get to look at that, but I couldn't imagine that it would have a huge impact. I would think most of the premiums going to the building and liability components would be my thoughts.
Yep. Heading back over to those comments, Pamela saying hi. Hi, Pamela. No need to apologise for being late. If you can swing by, you're always more than welcome. I'm seeing some questions there from Q Poodle, not so much focused on insurance, Q Poodle, so we may come back around to those. If we don't have the opportunity, if I don't have the opportunity to get stuck into your Strata questions on any particular Friday Live, the place to go to get those answered is over in our online membership community. And that's why I wanted to share with you all today that those doors are open over at stratamembership.com. That's where our Q&A forum is firing, and I'm in there focusing on our questions being asked by members. So if you have a question that we don't get around to on a Friday Live, then raising them in the members Q&A forum is the way to go. Now, Jane is making a comment. Haven't read it yet. Not a problem. Does the report discuss the ACCC inquiry into the Northern Territory?
So the ACCC inquiry was broader than that. It wasn't just Northern Territory. It was really all of Northern Australia. And so I've read the report, and I've sort of taken note of a couple of things, and we sort of refer to it briefly in the report. It sort of came out, the final report came out sort of midway through us writing or doing this research. So it doesn't specifically talk to it. And I sort of wanted to do that on purpose in a way, because I think it's a standalone piece, and I think the ACCC had 3 years to do it. And the ACCC looks at both strata and non-strata properties, and they go about sort of comparing them like they're similar in some ways, but also setting out in their report some distinctions in relation to that. I think it's a report that people should have a look at, but I think my feelings were that strata is so different. It's such a complex beast, so different from a standalone other property type, simply because we have much more mandatory requirements around insurance, and the complexity of it's very different. It's highly regulated, very different to a house in a normal freestanding dwelling. You can choose to have insurance or not. That's really up to you. You don't have the luxury of that in strata. So I didn't want to sort of get too caught up in what their results were and where they were having. I mean, obviously they had extraordinary powers in terms of getting access to data that I didn't have. The government has powers to compel insurance companies to provide them with data and certain data, but I wanted to have I just wanted to have a different mindset and look at data in a different way. So I reviewed it. I know about it. There are a couple of points that I refer to it in it, but it's not directly discussed.
And Jane, if you want to get your hands on a copy of the report we have put on Nicole's report, if you haven't read it yet, we have popped a link into the comments here on Facebook, and we'll come back around and pop that into LinkedIn as well. Now, I want to make sure, Nicole, we cover the topic of insurance commissions before we run out of time, and time is absolutely flying. when we were talking about your research, your planned research back in December, we were hearing that owners were very excited to share their thoughts, their comments, their criticism, perhaps, of the practice of our strata managers taking commissions from insurers. And I know you had a particular expectation, perhaps, of what owners might say under survey when asked about this, and maybe a surprising result. Can you speak to that?
Somewhat. So, of course, these results are really always dependent on who is surveyed and who decides to take up the survey. And that's why I've sort of said right from the outset that, this was a very sophisticated group of people that actually did the survey. And so, as we know, stepping back a little bit, that the majority of strata management companies have a fee arrangement that is based on taking insurance commissions or part thereof. So they have an annual, usually per lot, core or agreed services fee, plus they have a disbursements amount, and then incomes generated through commissions from insurers. Sometimes that's split between a broker. It's really up to the broker and the management company to determine what that split may be, if any. And so the insurer is just paying one entity, so they're usually paying directly to the broker, and then it's up to the broker and manager to divvy up the commission. And so a few things in relation to this. So one thing that I was really interested, I wanted to hear from owners about what they actually thought about commissions and what their knowledge was around commissions, because I had a bit of an idea about how the commission system worked, but when I started to delve in, I was really surprised about actually how it does work. And so, and I think that is one thing that needs to be much more communicated, and I'd call out to owners to ask their managers exactly how it all works. They need to be more transparent, and you need to ask the questions of them about how it actually works. And so we've been talking about commissions. Commissions have been raised for a number of years in Strata. Obviously, it was a very big focus in the ACCC report as well. And so one of the points for me was just to ask owners what they actually felt. Did they actually care about commissions? Were they against them? Did they want better regulation? All those sorts of things that I wanted to sort of find out from people, because no one had really asked owners, I don't think, before in that sort of way. And so when we asked that question, about close to 40% of those lot owners, so remember this sophisticated group of people, said they want commissions abolished. They hate commissions. They're quite principled on that. Another 30% or so were very much about regulation. So I think that comes back to disclosure and being more transparent. And again, that was a theme that came through in spades all across this research. They just want more information. They want people to be really upfront with them about exactly how this works so that they can make an informed decision. And so I'm urging the managers to do that, but I also urge the lot owners and committees to ask these questions very clearly to their managers, because they have choice. There are managers out there that refuse to take commissions, that aren't interested in it. They have a different type of fee arrangement model, and you should seek those out if you're against the commission system, which is based on most companies. And so then what I wanted to know with the people that were really the abolitionists that were, I probably wasn't overly surprised by that amount. I probably thought it would be higher. But people had, there were core areas in which to say yes or no to, so they didn't have a lot of choice. I sort of pushed them into different holes. And so when you look at sort of the people that want better regulation or are the abolitionists, you sort of see that there's a tendency there that there's something not right. And so I then isolated those that were the abolitionist group, and I asked them, well, would you change your position if the fee, the agreed services fee, or that core fee that gets paid on an annual basis, usually per lot, if that goes up, does your position change in relation to how you feel about insurance commissions? So we did it in increments. So if it changed by up to 25%, if it changed by 25 to 50%, and so forth. So we had 4 different ranges there. And what was really clear is the position did change very, very quickly. So people viewed it as, we hate commissions, we're very firm on that, but if we have to pay more through our agreed services fee, then our position starts to change very quickly. So we'll be sort of less on the abolitionist side if that fee structure changes, which I think was a bit surprising to me, given what I would consider a fairly low base in terms of the fees that are actually paid. When you've got on average $200-300 per lot per annum being paid for that agreed services fee, it's different in some states, it goes up, and it's slightly lower in a state like Queensland, but that's the basic average range. Well, then a 25% increase or a 50% increase, is not a huge amount when you look at the size of budgets for most of these larger schemes, which is sort of what we were looking at. So I was a bit surprised that their position changed so very quickly. But I think at the end result here, it's just really about a stepped approach in relation to commissions. This is what I feel. I think what needs to happen is people need to be much more transparent. People need to know exactly where the money goes, where the money comes from, with the services that are being provided, and how that money is actually utilised from those commissions by the management companies. Oftentimes they're pooled under that general portfolio. They don't align with individual schemes. And so that information has to be communicated to people so that they can make a better decision about their management. This is a customer service oriented environment, and the consumer, being the owners corporation and those lot owners, need to be more informed and need to actually ask these questions, and the managers need to be very transparent about how it works.
And I think you can really see the link there between the manager communicating their value and exactly what it is that they do, and the owner being upset should the cost of the management service increase. Because if you've got owners who don't understand or are not aware of the value that a strata manager brings, of course, it feels like pain. It feels like a slap in the
Of
face
course.
if the cost of the service is going to increase by 25% or 50%. But if you,
Yep.
I can think of some people professionals that I pay money to. My dog trainer is one of them that I think, oh my God, you give so much value, and I would pay you so much more money if you ask for it, just because of the way that he communicates that value and that sets out the services that he does and packages up. And I just think, wow, this is amazing. And then on the other hand, accountants, lawyers can be very bad at this as well. Strata managers that you think, oh my God, there's thousands of dollars that I'm paying. And it all comes back to that ability to tell your story, to market your worth, to have that knowledge transferred to your clients of exactly what it is that you do and that you bring to
Exactly.
them.
Because under this area, we had open boxes and, really allowed people to, to communicate their thoughts about what was going on. And it was overwhelming. We had so much information provided to us by lot owners, and the theme was the same. We don't know what you do, and you get all this money. You don't know what you do, and then you get all the commission. How's this fair? So there's something really wrong there if so many people are telling us that they don't know what strata managers are doing in relation to that commission, that insurance commission. So it's the onus is absolutely truly on the management industry to make it very clear to their clients what they do.
Yeah, and they've been armed with an incredibly valuable resource here in your report. Now, you've mentioned brokers a few times there, Nicole, and it's not the first time that I've heard that brokers have a really important role to play. And sometimes this resource that is a broker is not tapped into. I have chatted to a couple of brokers on the podcast, actually, and learned over the years a little bit more about what it is they do. I know you have a suggestion that owners can actually use the power of a broker more intelligently. Can you share those thoughts?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think the first thing is that, the strata manager needs to communicate very effectively about whether they are using a broker on behalf of a client, and to give owners choice about brokers to use, understand their services, and that should be communicated really effectively as well. There seems to have been sort of an emergence of brokers. I think they've been around in some states for a while, and I think it seems to be that some of the changes in the New South Wales legislation around this 3 quotes section has really moved this whole commission, this brokerage industry further. So it's been utilised much more since that sort of came into force, I believe. And I think, again, they're getting paid for services. You need to know the services. And I think you should be inviting them into your committees and asking them lots of questions about insurance, what their role is, what their job is. I mean, their job's quite vital. They're the ones giving you real advice around the insurance. You need to ask them questions about what the components are of the insurance, about the policies that are being taken up, where they potentially can save money. Do they need to have a higher excess that might then bring down their insurance, and what impact that may have? There's all different ways around with insurance that people need to have much more information to make better decisions about. And so I think really putting it onto the brokers to say, well, you're getting part of the commission. You're there to provide these services to us. You're that real conduit between the insurer or the underwriting agency and the manager through as agent for us. Get them in the room, ask them the questions. I mean, I must say, up until I started this project, I had no communication whatsoever with our brokers. And I tell you what, when I started researching this, I was on the phone to the broker going, okay, I've had a look at the invoices. How does this all work? How's this commission split? What do you do for us in relation to the money that you get? Please give me a detailed outline of the services that you actually provide. So I think it's important, again, to make sure that you have a good relation, get the manager to invite them on your behalf into meetings and have a discussion about what the services that they actually provide.
Did you come across in your research, Nicole, or even your personal experience, any reports of pushback on the part of insurers or brokers when it comes to communicating directly with a committee member or with an owner? I hear that sometimes from my clients and from owners, simply saying, Amanda, I'd love to do all those things. I'd love to find out more about the insurance, but I ring up and I'm told, oh no, we can't talk to you because you're not the strata manager or you're not the secretary of the committee.
Well, I think if that happens, it's time to move on. Find a new broker or find a new manager. I mean, that's just not acceptable. You're the consumer. You're the one paying. You're the one ultimately paying for this. And so
receiving the benefit. Yeah.
And I think for in any service industry where you're a customer, why would anyone put up with that? I certainly wouldn't. If I rang my lawyer and said, can you come and have a chat to our committee about what's going on here? And they said, oh, no, we'll just communicate. As if I'd keep them on. That's a no-go. No, they are a service provider and you are the consumer, and I would just be demanding it. And if they don't come up to scratch, well, then it's probably time to move on. And you also, from the conversations that I had with people, that wasn't really an issue. I think they like to deal with committees that are high-functioning committees that are very harmonious, understand what's going on in their scheme and communicate effectively. That was clear to me. Don't we all? They struggle when there's really fractured committees that aren't disclosing information properly, very difficult to deal with, won't do anything in terms of repair and maintenance of the building, that sort of stuff. So, that came across, but as far as directly communicating with clients, that didn't come out in anything that I saw.
And indeed, for the first time in my career, really, in the last couple of years, I've heard of a few examples of buildings that were not able to get insurance, or at least found it extremely difficult and were pushed to the 11th hour, really, because of insurers that were simply unwilling to quote because of claims history, because perhaps it's a competitive market. Did you have findings in your report about that?
Yeah, definitely. There are some schemes that find it almost impossible, and I think some impossible to get cover. And it's sometimes for a varied reason. So some of the schemes up in the north, just because of the nature of where they're located and the perils, especially up in the northern parts of sort of Queensland and WA, have very little choice in terms of what insurer that they can go with. And some of them had to go internationally, so they'll go to somewhere like Lloyd's that will get them covered, but very difficult in some areas to get choice. In some of the bigger cities, also those that are very big, complicated buildings that might have defect issues, again, difficult to get cover, especially if they want to move. So if they want to change providers, that becomes even more difficult for people. The insurer sort of said to me that if you've got a building that has issues around defects and they've been a client for a long time, they try and help assist in keeping them as a client and going through the process with them to deal with any sort of rectification issues. But changing is very difficult, and if it's a really complex building, or if it's a building or a scheme that's probably not a traditional type of scheme, so it might have farm elements or that sort of thing, included in the scheme, that can be really difficult to get insurance as well. So yes, because availability or the different types of insurance that are providing these sorts of products has shrunk, making it very, very difficult just because of the nature of the market at the moment.
And I'm sure the pandemic is not going to assist with that into the future as we start to have these new questions, as I spoke about at the top of this chat, about duty of care and use of common property by members of the public and perhaps unvaccinated residents. There is a whole series of questions relating to insurance and insurance coverage in that situation that I'm sure will be airing perhaps over the next year or so.
Absolutely. Well, I think, there's lots more work to be done, more research to be done in so many areas of strata. We're just scratching the surface, but I really look at this report as, because it's the first of its kind, and it seems to be the first of its kind anywhere in the world. I'm getting lots of people across the globe contacting me about it, but it's a starting point, and I don't profess to say that this is all perfect and it covers everything. We've still got more work to do, but this project could have gone on for 3 or 4 years. There's so much data and there's so much information around strata insurance. Could be never ending, really. But I think it's a good start. We've got something down on paper that I hope that helps, both managers communicate better and for owners to feel a little empowered to sort of ask some of these questions of their manager and broker.
Well, you've got plenty down on paper, that's for sure. We will just add in there again, Rochelle, the link to the report so our viewers can go over and have a look at that. Nicole, you have a particular skill at conveying complex information in an easy to understand, easy to read way with very clear takeaways for stakeholders, whether they are strata managers or consumers. And I thank you for that. It is definitely a valuable resource. And thank you for giving us your time when I know you are so busy, and when I see what's happening on LinkedIn, whenever you release a report, I think you're busy for the next 2 years and then you release another report. So
yes, we're just about to start a new one. So we're just sort of wrapping up with over the next week or so with the insurance one, and then we're off to a new project that's quite big and exciting. So yes, that's great.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for Friday Live. I hope you have a fabulous weekend. I would love for you to go out and check stratamembership.com if you'd like to join us inside our online community. You have until midnight this Sunday. I would love to see you in there enjoying all of those member benefits. And also, that is the page to check out the replay of our bylaws webinar and make sure you are not making one of the 4 bylaw mistakes. So head over to stratamembership.com for that one, and we'll send you out into your weekend. Thank you, Dr. Nicole Johnston. Enjoying
Pleasure.
the sunny state. Hopefully some of us can be there soon.
Take care. Thank you.
You too. Bye.